So welcome everybody. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about the Flourish survey template. This template is quite a powerful template, and we've got quite a lot to cover, but don't worry, we'll be sending around the slides afterwards, and they have links to the relevant help docs in. And my colleagues are on hand to reply to any questions as we go through, so feel post them in the chat as we go along. We're going to break the session into 3 sections. The first section will look at why you would use a survey template, sort of how it works, what the data looks like, and then we'll create a basic visualization. In the second section, we'll go through and customize our visualization using some of its features such as the label overrides, group ordering, and grouped questions. And in the final section, we'll look at a different data set, explore some of the other settings such as the custom pop-ups, and see how we can bring the data to life using a story. So let's get started. When would you use the survey template? So the survey template is a great tool for visualizing raw survey data where you have a number of respondents and their answers to various questions. The main key to the data structure is to have one row representing one respondent. And as such, it works just as well for visualizing index data where you have, for example, one row per country and a number of metrics related to that country. One of the great features of the survey template is that you can give your users control to explore the data themselves, as well as you presenting the key insights to them. Why might you want to use the survey template? Well, in the first instance, it's great for helping with your own data analysis, enabling you to draw out insights because you can cut the data into different views so you can easily spot interesting narratives. Each dot represents a single entity, so you can create a story following a particular individual around if you wanted to. And you can display the data in groups, on a map or on a waffle chart, and you can color and size the dots for extra emphasis. Creating a story moving from one view to another is a great way to lead your customers through the data. So we'll jump into the app now and take a look at how you can show different views of the data. Let's get my window up. So here I am on my projects page, and I'm going to create a new visualization. Scroll down to the bottom to get to the survey template. Open it up. As with all Flourish templates, it starts with some sample data, which we will use to begin with. And you can see in the preview pane here, we've got this control section, which allows us to group the data and to view it on a map, and to view it in a chart like this. And there are various different things you can do. For example, you can change the shape into a square, which looks nice, or even into hexagons, which is quite nice when you go back to the group view. So the other thing you can do is shade by different groups, and you can also size by different factors as well. So let's have a look at the data and have a look at the data structure, and then we can see how it works. So as you can see on here, we've got one row per respondent, and each column is a sort of answer to each of the questions. And the questions are either have a categorical number as a response or a continuous number, a numerical number. And so as you can see on the data bindings over here, you would select them to visualize on the basis of, are they categorical, are they continuous, or are they geographic? And so in this case, the categorical columns are A for gender, and then G to M, which is these ones. So favorite food, so Mexican is a category, steak is a category. And then in the case of these ones, which animals do you like? Snake, the answers are 0 or 1. And so those are, it's a category of sort of yes or no. Then when we look at the continuous columns, we've got here C and D, which are numbers. So the weight is just a number on a continuous scale. And so the higher numbers would be larger and the smaller numbers would be smaller. And the same goes for height. And then if we look at the geographic columns here, we've got E and F. And these are just countries. So in here, we've got 2 answers, home country and favorite country. And we'll look at countries later when we see how it relates to the places tab. So as you can see, there are lots of data tabs in the data area, but all of the main data is in the data tab. And we'll come to the group order and the other ones later on. So what I'm going to actually do is clear this sheet and upload my own data, which I'm just copying and pasting from an Excel spreadsheet. I'm just pasting it in. Takes a minute there, which is actually very similar to the sample data, but has a couple of extra columns to be able to show interesting examples. So now we need to double check that we've got the column bindings right. So again, categorical columns here, A, and then G, but actually there's a couple of more columns now, so we need to change that to say M to G to O. O, not 0. And then the other columns are still all the same. So if we go back to the preview, we can now view the data that we've uploaded. And so let me go back to my presentation. So we talked through the data bindings being categorical, numerical, or geographical. And now we're going to talk about label overrides. So this is a good way to rename or shorten your column headings without having to edit the column names in the data tab itself. So for example, if you might want to update the data later on by pasting the whole thing in again, you wouldn't want to necessarily have to keep changing the columns as they go. So there's another way of doing this using the label overrides. And it's useful, as you can see here, to take a really long-winded question and change it into a short label. So let's go back into the app to show you how to do that. So if we look on here, we've got an option here, group by. We've got how satisfied are you with the weather in your country? And here you can see that it is getting cropped off. And so if we go into the data, we've got this column heading. If we have a look, which I'm going to take a copy of here, if we go into the label override setting, it's quite straightforward. You just need to put in the original label, which is a copy and paste of the heading from the data tab. You have to be quite particular to make sure that there aren't any extra bits of white space in, which can sometimes happen, especially if you're bringing data in from Excel. And then you just type in the name that you want to have instead. So if we say weather satisfaction. So this is now a shorter label for this question. If I go back to the preview, you can see now that that has been updated automatically. So instead of having how important is it, or how satisfied are you, now it's changed to say weather satisfaction, and that is a bit clearer for everybody. So that's how to add extra label overrides. The next thing you might want to do is change the group order of how your labels of your groups are displayed, particularly if you have a scale. So for example, from very important to not very important, you'd want to have them on that sliding scale rather than in a random order. So by default, everything is ordered alphabetically. So if we go back into the app now, we can see how to set the group order. So on here, you can see with the weather satisfaction, it's got highly dissatisfied, neutral, quite dissatisfied, quite satisfied, very satisfied. So this is not in the right order, really, for what we wanted to say. So if we go back to the data tab, there's a group order tab. And in here, we need to paste in, I've actually prepared something here. So you paste in up the top the question of that particular column, and then you just put the order in that you want to have, the view that you want to have. And I'll also do this for the other question, how important is it to go abroad on holiday? So we'll go very important, quite important, neutral, not very important, not important at all. And so now if we go back to the preview, hopefully this will have worked. Hasn't worked. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the data and paste, copy and paste this, which is a very typical thing to have happened. Now you see that didn't look like it made any changes, but I think it has made a difference. And so I'm going to copy and paste this question as well. Right, so now if I go back, so now you can see when I go to weather satisfaction, very satisfied, quite satisfied, neutral, quite dissatisfied, highly dissatisfied. And so that is now in the order that you want. And so for example, if you want to go onto this view and then compare you've got them all in the right order. So the next thing I wanted to do was to bring up a different example, which I made earlier, which is using country data. So, well, let me just stop there and see if anyone's got any questions on what we've done so far. And I see there's a question in the chat about other types of data sets. So this is an example of a different type of data set that we're showing, for example, where you've got one row per country here, or you could have it maybe per state, or it doesn't have to be geographical, just so per person, if you're doing something about MPs or something like that, members of Congress, then absolutely we can do that. So if we look at this, as I said, this is different. This has got much more interesting numerical data. So the first one had quite a lot of categorical data, but this one has got a lot more numerical data. So as you can see, if we look at the columns here, the categorical columns are really just A to C, the country and the continent and the subcontinent, whereas the continuous columns are D to N. So we've got just lots of metrics around each of the different countries. And one of the other thing, and then the geographic columns, there are 3 geographic columns here: country, continent, and subcontinent. But I've chosen not to visualize the initial country as something that you can plot on the map. So these geographic columns are specifically the ones that you want to be able to plot when you're looking on the map view. So the way that relates is using this Places tab. So we've got the list of countries here, but how does Flourish know what this country is or where it is? So it's all linked through on the Places tab. So we have this name column, and this is where we need to put in the names of the places matching those in the main data sheet. So here we've got South America, which is one of the subcontinental regions. And we've got Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Middle East, North and America, Latin America. Oh, actually, South America is the continent, and the subcontinent is Latin America and the Caribbean. So if we go back to places, so on here we've got South America, and then what we've got is the longitude and latitude for a place in South America, which is going to be the defining sort of center point of South America. And again, for Africa, we've got a latitude and longitude showing Africa, and the latitude and longitude for Europe, and all the different continents and subcontinents, and then each of the countries as well. So when you create a visualization using the survey, it's already got sample data in place for the countries, but I had to manually add in the ones for the continents and subcontinents. So if we now go back to the preview, if we go onto the map, you can see that everything is split across the different continents, which is quite nice. And then so here you've got the option to go by continent or subcontinent. And then it's quite nice also to color it as well. But then one of the other things I wanted to do was show you that the sizing is much more interesting at this point. So if we do, for example, size by population, it's really obvious that India and China have got the biggest populations. So there's another, what you can see here is that actually we've got the name of the country on the dot, which we didn't have in our other visualization. There's nothing on the dots. So these dots haven't got anything on because they're quite small, but these ones have, and it's particularly nice and obvious here. And that is because in the data tab, we've used this label. So in here, we've used the label to link to show the country. Is there a size by tab that you have to set in the spreadsheet? No, what it's doing, which I'm sorry, I didn't quite explain this earlier. The categorical columns are the columns that you then get as an option in the group by and the shade by. So here are my categorical columns and the shade by, but then in the numerical columns are the columns that you can size by. So that's why there's a lot of choice here of the different columns for sizing, because they've been put in as numerical columns, whereas in this other visualization over here, we've only got the option to size by weight or height because they were the only numerical columns in the data on here. So that's why it's more interesting for doing the sizing using this data instead. So yeah, so you can do it by population. So we've got the label showing here. The other thing that is slightly annoying me now is the pop-ups. So one way of having the pop-ups is for them to pop up when you're hovering over them, which is quite good. And for example, you can see the default pop-up, which is automatically created, just has a list of the columns and the answers. And if you click on the pop-up, then it will fix on that one and highlight it and not highlight the others. But standard, you can sort of move around and hover over all of them. So if we go into our pop-up settings over here, you can set it to pop up on hover or just on click. So if we go to click, then now it doesn't come up every time you're moving around over it, but if you do click on it, it will come up. And the other thing we can do is change the content. So this is the automatic contents, but it's a bit dry. So it's a bit like with a lot of Flourish templates, you can have custom content. So here's an example which I put in earlier, just do absolutely your own HTML. And this just makes it a bit more interesting, highlighting the name of the country and just a couple of the metrics rather than all of them. So let me just go back to my presentation. So yes, I just wanted to clarify about the pop-ups there, that you can set it to hover or click, and you can add extra info for pop-ups, and we've got a help doc talking about how to customize your own pop-ups. Then the next thing I wanted to show, which is the most sort of useful aspect of Flourish, is creating a story. So with all Flourish visualizations, when you have a visualization, this when you publish it, it always goes back to the base starting point of the page. It doesn't save the state at all. So what you really want to do is create a story where you can lead your customer through the different insights that you've made from your survey or from your data, and that way you can kind of make sure that they take away from it what you want them to take away from it, rather than them kind of looking at it and not really knowing what to find or what there is. And you can do this with a single slide as well. Even if you just want to have one page, you can make it into a story and then change the view to show this particular view, and then just publish a single slide story, and you can turn off the navigation so it doesn't have an arrow from one slide to one. Or you can create a story with multiple slides and then take your customer through it. So I'll go back to the app. So here's my example story, which I made earlier using the map slide. So here, so for example, I've got the visualization, and I've put it onto the map view, and I've colored it by continent. And so if we look at the cog here, I've grouped it by subcontinent and shaded it by continent. And then I've closed the controls because the customer doesn't need to see that. And then I've made a little caption. We looked at countries of the world grouped by region. And then on the next page, you see this is where we get a nice animation showing how the countries move from one view to another. And this is now grouped by continent, but sized by area. And so then you can see, and then it's also highlighted on Russia. And so you can see Russia has the largest area. And you can see it's very obvious that Russia has the largest area because it's the biggest hexagon. So that's nice. And you can have it. So then when people come to this, they're going to see this page with this view. And then if we go to the next one, again, now I've changed it so that it's sized by population instead. And so then, and then I've highlighted China, and you can say China has the largest population. And that again is very obvious because it's just the biggest hexagon. And you can see that not very many people live in Australia and the whole of Oceania. And in fact, not that many people live in North America, although the United States does have quite a high population. So then in terms of creating the story, what you can do is you can just, because you're making the slide from the same visualization, underlying visualization, so you can just take a duplicate to get to the next slide, and then you can change the view. So for example, here we could draw, we could compare continent to country. That's not very good. Continent to subcontinent, let's say. And then we can add another comment there. And then here we can have a final slide where we just remove all the filters altogether, get it back to the basics, and then just make a comment saying, explore the data for yourself. So that's a nice way to end a story that you've made with a survey, so that the users can do it themselves. And so then if, for example, if we publish this now, and then we go and view it, so we can walk through this. And the other good thing about stories is that you can have it to autoplay, and that you can add audio as well if you want to have a backtrack. So here, and you can either have this displaying or turn it off. And so there you are at the end. Now the user can come along and think, oh, I want to find out about Ghana. That's interesting. Or maybe I'll have a look and look at them all on the map and then see, look at this, you know, and then they can just explore it themselves. So that's really interesting. I'm just having a look at the chat. Why can I not see the slides bar on the left? Which slides bar? This one here. Well, you can't see it on the published. Do you mean on the published version? It doesn't show up on the published version, but it does show up. You should be able to see it when you're editing in the, actually editing. In the, you know, when you're in the story editor, you should have the slide, but if you haven't got very many slides, you won't have it. So, but it doesn't appear when it's published because it's just the output itself. So let's go back to the presentation. And then I just wanted to show a few real world examples from some of our customers. So for example, this is by the REAR group, how looking at attitudes to Australian property. So you can see how they've walked people through slicing things here. Just go through it quickly. But it's just, you know, it's very nice and engaging and very clear what their story is and what they're trying to explain. And then there's another example, which is the EY wavespace map, which is slightly different because that's just a single slide. So here they've got a number of offices which they call wavespace around the world, and this is just showing where the different places are, and this way you can get some nice pop-ups and then click through and find out about particular locations. So that's just a nice way of doing that. And then the last one is this, is actually a scrolly. So doing what we call scrolly telling, that is a sort of premium feature, as you say. So this way is particularly good. So these people have done a survey, and it's forcing, as you're scrolling down the page, I'm just scrolling down the page here, and the captions are appearing above the visualization as we go through. And so you can see this is, it's kind of forcing the user to read through the whole thing. So that's just another nice example there. Here is just a standard list of resources linking through to all our help docs and our blog and our newsletter, and a link to the webinars and our YouTube channel. This webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And if you need any questions with maps, we can do that. And then I've also linked a couple of resources here, but there are also other help docs in the slides themselves.